Hey, welcome. My name is Caleb. I'm the lead pastor. I am just thrilled to be able to be with you this morning. I know you've been adjusting to life every week and it's been changing. And we want to connect and give you encouragement today. And this month or this next couple of weeks, we're going to be going through a new sermon series to handle those adjustments because we want to be able to make lemonade. But what happens when life takes your lemons? This last week I was buckling up the boys in the van because Christine was going to take the kids on a little trip around Detroit Lake and do a little bit of exploring or just kind of get out of the house. I needed to have a meeting with some people in our church over our strategic plan for the church, and there was a couple people on that meeting that in order for us to talk and hear each other, I couldn't have kids running around the house. Zach, Brendan, Judy, Carrie, and Jim were all part of that meeting, and I remember telling Christine as she was leaving, because I saw that face on her eyes, and like, oh my gosh, the kids are already out of control, and I have to help buckle them up. And I tried to give her the best encouragement I could. I said, hey, you know what? It is what it is. Just make the best lemonade you can. And she replies back, with this sassy remark. And this is one of the reasons why I love Christine. She just has something really quick to say. But she says, but what if no one ever taught you? What if, people are asking you to do things now that you've never been taught to do? You're in a place where you don't know how to handle life because you've never been in this place before. And so that's why the next couple of weeks, I want to talk about how do you make lemonade when life takes your lemons? What do you do? How do you handle your finances when things have been taken away that you normally depend on? How do you handle your intellectual, your education, your learning? How do you handle your relationships and how to be healthy in both in relationships with others, but just your physical well-being? And then lastly, and most importantly, how do you live, how do you create this new spiritual growth in light of everything? I mean, you're sitting at home, 90% of you probably are in your jammies, and you're watching in and trying to grow and be closer with Christ as you're trying to hear what he might have to say with you today. Things are different. No one really ever taught you how to do that. And so the next couple weeks, I want to help you make lemonade when life takes your lemons. So this strategic planning team that I was on video chat form with, we started just asking each other, hey, how's it been this last Easter Sunday? Hey, thanks for everybody popping in on the Saturday and on the video form, and it was a Zoom. And Jim Jackson shared with me, this is brand new to me. I've never been on Zoom before. I was like, last month, I remembered I coached him the day before on how to use Google Hangouts, which is another way to chat online through video. And we had to learn that for the first time ever. And now I heard him for a second time. And what struck me was just the way he was sharing about it. He had this sense of, there wasn't any complaining. There wasn't any whining. There was a little bit of anxiousness and a little bit of, I didn't know if it was going to work, but he was there and he was happy to be there and he was learning something new. And I know Jim has been learning a lot of things that are new, and I'm sure there's a lot of you that have been learning new. But what I really want to encourage us to do, and maybe have permission to do, is to look at this new season, this normal that we're engaging in now, and then just looking forward, not looking behind us. Because Jesus, when people came to him and they had a question like, hey, what we used to do or what we've been taught to do always isn't what you're doing. Jesus is, why don't you teach your disciples to do what we've been taught to do? John the Baptist, the cousin of Jesus, was a rabbi, and he had his own following and his own followers, and they actually came to Jesus asking that question, like, hey, we're fasting. We are, not eating food so that we can grow closer with God, but you're not teaching your disciples to do that. Why? And Jesus says this in Matthew chapter 9. He addresses this. It says in verse 14, one day, the disciples, John the Baptist, came to Jesus and asked him, Why don't your disciples fast like we do and the Pharisees do? And Jesus responds with three different metaphors. And the first one is one that would these disciples of John the Baptist would have been like, oh, yeah, I know what you mean by that. You know, when you hear it for the first time, it might not click as much. But let me read this. It says, Jesus replied, "Do wedding guests mourn while celebrating with the groom? Of course not. But someday the groom will be taken away from them, and then they will fast." See, the disciples of John the Baptist were following John, and John was the best cheerleader for Jesus. He would say things like, "I'm not even worthy to untie Jesus's sandals. Like, I wouldn't even be worthy to wash his dishes." I mean, John the Baptist was his biggest fan. And he even mentions, like, he is the bridegroom. I'm just the best man. John the Baptist would be like, I'm just the guy that's there to celebrate with him. And Jesus is referencing, hey, I'm the bridegroom, remember? You're the best man. And when you go to a party for the bridegroom, when you have a bachelor party, when you're at the wedding feast, you don't fast. You don't mourn. You don't grieve. What you do is celebrate. And those celebrations are important. When I first came to Oregon, it was actually for a celebration. One of my friends that I grew up with in Texas got married. He ended up moving to Oregon and having his last year of high school in Oregon, and he found a wife, and he got married. He invited me to be part of his wedding. It was in Oregon. It was my first trip to Oregon, and I remember when I first came and we're driving through I-5, and I just looked up and I'm like, oh my gosh, these trees are so tall. I've never seen trees this tall before in my life. But the best part was we would all, right before, the day before the wedding, it was a bachelor party, we all went out on the Deschutes River, and we ended up rafting and getting in this boat and getting wet and getting thrown off and getting thrown in and just kind of wrestling with the river, and it was a lot of fun. Now, none of us after that raft then went on to, not eat for the rest of the day. None of us on that trip then went on and cried in our beds at night. No, what we did was we went and feasted at a restaurant. We ate lots of food. We celebrated. We shared stories and memories. And Jesus is saying, hey, I'm here. I am the bridegroom, and you don't fast when I'm here. He's trying to change a little bit of how they were seeing Jesus. And that's where this next metaphor Jesus gives, the next verse, he says this. He says, besides, who would patch old clothing with new cloth? For the new patch would shrink and rip away from the old cloth, leaving an even bigger tear than before. He's saying, guys, there's an old way of doing things, and then there's me. This old cloth cannot be patched with a new cloth. Bad things will happen. It'll tear. I want you to start looking at me, looking at Jesus. I am a new cloth, and you put me in this old way of doing things. And today, we've been put in this new situation. We've been put in this new season, and it's been somewhat by force. All for good reasons and for health reasons. But I want to talk a little bit about today. How can we start looking at this new season, this new time in our life, in our family's life, in our work life, in our personal life, in our life with God, in our life with our children? How can we look at those things in a new way? And yeah, the old way, the way we did things before Corona, which I'm calling pre-Corona, pre-Corona, like those were good. There's no argument about that. But now, 4 weeks in, 5 weeks in, what are those new rhythms? What are those new ways that we're going to be having to develop and grow so that we can grow? Because not everybody's been taught. Maybe no one's been taught how to handle something like this. And I want to help you with that. And Jesus, he continues, because he wants everybody to understand this. And the way he's talking, the disciples would all understand this. Like this next metaphor, his disciples would be like, well, duh. this is common sense. Not we kind of miss a little bit of what that looks like today. But listen to this. It says, Jesus says, no one puts new wine into old wineskins. For the old skins would burst from the pressure, spilling the wine and ruining the skins. And this is really important because sometimes people think of when Jesus came on planet Earth that he didn't care about how things used to be, and he just comes in and he has this new way of living, and he doesn't like how what all the traditions were. He doesn't like how the people use the traditions to make others suffer. This next verse tells me that he cares for all people. He says, new wine is stored in new wineskins so that both are preserved. Meaning, he wants both how things what used to be preserved and how things are now to be preserved. I was in my office this week and I was literally looking at the screen and not knowing what to do. I didn't know how to write down my list of my to-dos for the week. I didn't know what the most important thing was for the week. I didn't know what I was going to actually accomplish for the week, and I went in this kind of a numb mode. Wanted to just get away because yet again I had to pivot and I had to change how everything looked. James started distance learning this week, and so I brought him to work with me. I set his laptop on the counter. I made sure he had all his devices and all his pencils and papers, and we had a list of what his schedule was going to look for the day, so that he would be able to get everything he needs done, and then I would need to be able to get everything I needed done. But it was literally hands-on, parent distance learning, mode with him. And I'm sure with many parents out there, there's a new norm you're having to learn, and it's not easy. But I was taking it where it was causing me to be frustrated. It was causing me to be a little angry. It was causing me to be a little anxious because I was using everything that I used to accomplish as my reference. I was using this old wineskin as my standard of productivity, my standard of what work looks like. And I was trying to pour this new wine into it. I was trying to pour this new wine of, distance learning, quarantine, washing my hands every 30 seconds, all these things into it. And I was bursting. I don't know if for you, if you felt that tension of what you used to be able to do and what you can't do anymore.
Preach.
What you really want to do, but it's not working. And so now, what do? What does making lemonade look like when life takes your limits? And for the next couple of weeks, we're going to be talking about, in order of least importance to greatest importance. We're going to be talking about parts of ourselves and our lives that I want to help you invest in. So financially, how are you handling your finances? Intellectually, how are you, learning and creating, creativity in maybe your education for your kids, but also for yourself. Physically, how are you taking care of yourself physically in this new norm? How are you taking care of your relationships? And also, most important, spiritually. And each of those are in order from least importance to greatest importance, because, Jesus told us what good is having both arms in heaven, or what's good of having both arms if your whole body is thrown into hell? What good is it that you are fearful of man who can take your life, and not fearful of God who can determine your destiny after life? There's this idea of the most important we got to keep up. So each week I want to share something spiritual that maybe you can look at in a new way. Because the word for new wine, at that last text, new wine and new wineskins, the new is the word neos in the Greek. And neos is in reference to it being not totally mature. It needs time to develop. It needs time to grow. It needs time to ferment. If you think about a wine, it needs time to ferment before it gets to be really good. So it needs time to continue. And the word for the new wineskin is actually kairos, which is more of a refreshing or renewing, or a fresh wineskin, something new. And when you think of wineskin, think of actually an animal skin that wine was poured into. And so as these people who are listening and hearing Jesus speak about wine and wineskins, they're all like, yeah, we know this. I mean, we do this all the time when we make wine. They would either get new wineskins and pour new wine in it, or if it was an older wineskin, they would make sure to readjust, to mend, to doctor up so that the new wine wouldn't burst it, but contain it and take care of it. So there's some things in your spiritual life that maybe you've used to do in the past that worked really well, but you haven't done them in a long time. Or maybe there's some things you just need to start and you haven't done. One thing that I'm doing, I want to encourage you to do, is instead of reading a lot of scriptures, instead of reading lots of chapters, instead of reading lots of different books, maybe of the Bible or about the Bible, I'm just reading a few verses. I'm going to use a few verses to be what I eat every day and meditate on those. See, most of us who are Christians or who believe in God or who read the Bible, we're about 3,000 verses overweight. We're obese when it comes to how many verses we eat versus how many verses we act out. And so what I want to do, instead of eating a lot of verses and not acting any of them out or letting them change me, I want to just take a few verses. And maybe, it's these three this week for you. That each day that you would read these three verses, and you would read them 3 times. And you would journal about them. You would ask God, what are you trying to teach me? And then the next day, you'd read those verses again. And then the next day, you'd read those verses again. And you would spend a few days and just let that meditate, not just in your mind, because meditation is more than that. It's how can it impact our heart, and then how can it impact our hands, our head, heart, and hands. And so meditation is a great way to maybe refresh or renew that spiritual, something spiritual for you to invest in that's new. And I encourage you, let that be something that maybe you challenge yourself with, or maybe you're the opposite, and you just need to read more of the Bible because all you've been doing is, one verse and nothing else. I don't know where it is for you, but I want to encourage you. That's what I'm doing, and that's what I want to encourage you to do. Secondly, finances. How we used to spend our money, I hope, is different now. I understand a lot has changed with, businesses being closed, small businesses and restaurants being, takeout only, and it's changed you up. I mean, maybe you're having Grubhub and DoorDash and Uber Eats a lot more, but you really need to know how to use finances in this new era, in this new season, in this new normal. One thing that has come into play recently is your government stimulus checks for those that are making less than $75,000 as an individual or as a couple $150,000 or less. You just received a stimulus check, or you're about to receive one. Christine and I received ours. It was $3,900. Whew! I don't know about you, but that wasn't what we never planned for that money. So what do you do when you have this money that you didn't plan for? Well, if we did the same thing we would have done before Corona, we might not use it as wisely as we should now. Christine and I are still wrestling and talking over how to use that money. I want to encourage you, if you have received that money, I want you to be prayerful about that. Like, how can you best use that money? And really, I want you, maybe this is the time you have a budget. Christine and I have a budget, but in our budget, we don't really say, hey, when we get our government check, what are we going to do with it? I mean, you kind of wait till it comes until you believe it, right? You're not too sure. And so maybe this is the time you actually make a budget. You actually write it down and you say, this is where how much money I've got, whether it's a little or a lot. This is where it's going to go, and every dollar has a name, so that at the end of the month you know exactly where all your money is going. Because pre-corona, you had no control over your money. Your money was going all sorts of different ways. You were using your credit cards, and you were paying on loans. I mean, you had way too much money. Because you know why I know this? 78% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. So that means we've been a whole month in Corona where a lot has changed. Like, you are struggling, and you have this stimulus check, and you're like, yes, I have something. Or maybe you're thinking, that's not enough. That is not enough. I can't even make it this next few weeks on that much. But now, how can we live a new normal? How can you create a new way so that you can make the best choices moving forward? Not looking at what's behind. That was then. This is now. Can you make a budget? Can you have a plan for your money instead of your money having a plan for you? Now, I want to encourage you. Some of you don't even need the stimulus check. Some of you are looking at this money and be like, wow, this is really nice. I think I'll go out to eat more. I'll get that really nice TV that I really wanted, or get those, things that I've been waiting to get but didn't really think I should get it. But now I have this free money. Well, I want to encourage you on two things. I want you to look at this as an opportunity that maybe you can give to somewhere that's going to make a huge impact. I was on a conversation with some other pastors, and he was asking us, hey, how you doing with your church and giving? I said, you know what? Our church, Free Methodist Church, we're doing actually really well. We have some faithful people that are giving, that have continued to give, and I'm so thankful that you are continuing to following God in that part of your life. And I just mentioned, hey, it's been kind of unique because Christine had a part-time job, and she's been laid off, and so that extra money wasn't a lot, but it was something that we were excited about because it was going to help us pay for a house. We were looking at, oh man, in August or maybe September, we'll be able to put a down payment, and we'll be able to save this amount of money. And it's kind of it's a bummer that we have to wait longer, but we'll be okay. And he just asked me, well, what's your Venmo? Like, what do you mean? For those that don't know, Venmo is a cash app. It's a mobile device banking app. And I said, he said, I want to bless you. And I was like, really? I mean, why would you do that? He told me, well, our church has been put in a place that we have a lot of resources right now because of how things have gone over the last couple of years, and they were a mobile church, and they sold their building, and they had this extra funds, and they believe that God had given them this money so that in this time they can be a blessing to others. And it just surprised me. And I loved the face that he had of how much joy he had with being able to give and bless others. And I could just see it in the other stories he was sharing about the other families and other people in our city that he's been able to bless in this time because of that. And maybe that is what these checks for you could look like. An opportunity to bless someone that you didn't have a plan to bless because you didn't have the money. And now is a great chance for that. And so there's two things I want to encourage you to do. There's what we call a benevolence fund in our church. And benevolence is where what we use as a church to give to people who call Salem First their home church, and who are struggling to meet maybe the ends meet. Maybe they're struggling to get that bill paid for the electricity. Maybe they're struggling to put food on their table. Maybe it's something more like they need a pair of boots for work and they couldn't afford them. Like, that would be where a benevolence funds would go to. People in our church that are struggling and could use extra support financially. And maybe that part of your giving through this extra funds from the government stimulus check goes to that. Then there's also a church plant that came out of this church, Emmaus, who's been working with our homeless population faithfully for the past 12, 15 years. And right now they're in a position to buy a building that they've been using as a place of resource for people struggling with homelessness. It's the JC building. And in order for them to purchase this building, they have to raise $300,000. And DJ Vincent, with support from Salem Leadership Foundation and Church at the Park, is raising that money in order to provide more resources for our homeless population, more stories of transformation around God's Word through Church at the Park. And perhaps your heart burns to serve our homeless population and you want to provide, and that is where you would love to see those finances go. I want to encourage you, that would be a place that you could give, and we'll provide those places of giving on our Facebook, on our website, and on our through email. But before we go, I just want to give you permission this week, if things change again, if things start to open back up, or you see people doing things that are different, that you wouldn't compare, that you wouldn't get frustrated, but you would begin to think, okay, it's a new wineskin today. I'm going to put new wine in it. I'm not going to try and do things the way they used to be done, because a lot of it we just can't. I want to encourage you, how can you make lemonade when life takes your lemons? And specifically, financially, how can you make decisions that are different, that are wise, that are new now, so that you can be set up in the future? How can your spiritual life begin to grow in this new season because you're trying something new, or you're tweaking, or you're adjusting so that you can grow? So let me pray for you. God, we thank you that you came down on planet Earth, and over you revealed yourself as someone new. So God, in this moment, in this season, may we see you in a fresh way. May we see you in a fresh way in how we deal with our finances, and in how we just deal with our relationship with you, God. We thank you that you have been there with us throughout this whole time, and we're not alone. And we thank you for Carrie Price and Mariah, who've been able to just share a little bit of themselves here this morning. And we pray that you would show us a direction in those places, and we would find just a closeness and nearness with you, God. We pray these things in your name. Amen.